Hello, networkers, and welcome back to another episode of Ask the Network Engineer, where I will answer one of your questions. And in this episode, I want to talk more about starting out and people getting their CCNA. So this is other type of questions that I talked about before. So in this episode, I want to answer two questions that somebody posted. Okay, and the first question was posted by Ong, and simply put, he has a question for advice. Should he take a CCNA before or after he gets a job with hands-on experience? And another question was posted by Angelo C. And he says that, hey, I just found your channel and all your videos. I really appreciate it. Thank you. You're welcome. I saw from a video that you study a lot. Can you please explain how you study? Which method do you use? And if Cisco official books is enough for studying, or if you need other resources. I would like to get the CCNA, but I don't want to focus on the exam only. Good man. Very, very good. I really want to be prepared for the job. Thanks a million for the channel. So very good questions. Let's go ahead and talk about that in this episode. Okay, so let's get to it. So the first one is very easy to answer by Ong. If you're going down the track of becoming a network engineer, whether you get your job before or after, get the CCNA done now. So there it is. In terms of Angelo C, that one's a little bit more interesting for me because how do I answer, like, how do I study? Because I really study, I read a lot. I read a whole lot. I read Cisco books. I read other vendor-based books. But I don't really read books anymore technology-wise because everything that I can reference is online. So I reference white papers, data sheets, case studies. I go to the vendor pages. I look at some of their knowledge articles. So I read really everything. So what I tell people starting out is don't look at networking as a big picture, because it's really big, because it's very intimidating for people starting out. Because even with networking, there are a lot of different specialties or things that you can focus on, like really like emphasize on a lot, like whether it's data center or security or voice or just routing and switching in general, wireless, for crying out loud. They have a lot of moving parts. Like even with wireless, like there's a lot of things about wireless that I don't know. And when I look at some of these article pages, I'm like, ooh, I don't need to, I never gone down that deep because I never had to do all of that. So that's why usually kind of starting out for most people that I tell them is you want to focus on just the routing and switching stuff because that's kind of the core. That's the foundation. Understanding what routing protocols are and switching protocols. And I think that the CCNA and some of the CCNP does a very good job of establishing that baseline. So just reading those books and doing labs from those books, that's kind of the only thing that you need to focus on. Don't worry about the other glitz and glamour that's out there, because there are tons of websites out there. Our website has stuff about routing and switching. So there's a lot of places that teach that. Okay, so focus on the routing and switching components because that core is important. If you don't understand that, okay, including basic networking, which is what the CCNA focuses on, okay, about packets and segments and three-way handshakes, those are also very critical. If you don't understand that, everything else is going to be irrelevant because you won't understand data center, you won't understand security, you won't really understand voice too much. So the core is really the important thing, and just reading any Cisco Press book for CCNA and doing the labs in there is a good job. I mean, it's good enough. Now, it also depends on what kind of learner you are, and I did an episode about that. That there are people that prefer a classroom environment or they prefer a self-learning environment. So for me, I prefer not to go to classes because I like to move at my own pace. I study things very differently, where I like to read the concepts that are relevant, but I like to get my hands dirty. And the CCNA books, they all have like these labs that you can just utilize and build and just learn from that. Okay, so So basically, that's really what I kind of tell people. Do you prefer just to learn on your own? That means you buy your own books, you buy your own equipment, okay? Or you can use GNS3, for example, to build your virtual labs. That's actually what everybody does now. Buying equipment now off of eBay doesn't make any sense. Everybody gets virtual labs, but there's licensing problems that people can't get access to. And then there it is, you do your self-learning. Well, the other part is you prefer a classroom environment where you like to just go to class and there's a teacher that is giving a lecture and teaching you about routing and switching and everything else. And hey, here's some lab access to equipment. So you have to determine what kind of person you are. Now, just to be 100 billion% honest, it is in your best interest to be a self-learning person. Okay, it's okay starting out that you get a classroom environment for learning about new technologies. I'm okay with that. And there's nothing wrong with that in terms of if a company is going to be paying for a lot of the training classes. But there's a lot of technologies out there, a lot of things that you can learn. And that's going to be a lot of classes that you may have to figure out, well, how am I going to fit that in to actually learn these new things? And that's why self-learning is the most efficient way that is possible. And that's why I usually tell people, you need to make sure that you're on a track of becoming a self-learner, that you can get the books, that you can get the videos that you need to watch and to learn. Okay, so the question is, what do I do? Okay, well, the best way I can answer that is you need a starting point. Okay, one of the big things for me is kind of three things that I kind of look at. Okay. Number one, I care about what is the current technology trends, what is hot, or what will be hot, and what should be important that I should learn in the future. Okay, that's important. Once I determine that, I care about how can I configure that. Okay, like, okay, so there's the Internet of Things, IoT. Okay, that's fantastic. That's a concept. That's a business marketing word. How do I actually deploy that? Okay. Give me examples of that. Give me a case study of that. Oh, okay, so this is how I can use it. Well, let me buy that equipment and let me learn to utilize it and deploy that. So when I deal with customer projects and if I hear a requirement, I can go, oh, hey, we can actually do this. And I have that experience of how to configure it. Okay. And the third component is I like to know how can I design it? What are best practices for that new technology or that solution? So those are the main things that I look at. What are the hot technologies that I need to know today or technologies in the future? How do I configure them? And how do I design it with best practices? Okay, so when it comes to the first one, which is simply what are the hot trends out there? Well, I look at things like Network World. I go to networkworld.com, they have a website, and I like to look there pretty much at the beginning or at the end of each year. Because sometimes they have things like, hey, hot technologies in 2019 and in the future. They list all those particular things. And there's other websites that have the same similar thing, that they talk about hot trends of technologies of that year. And I take note of that. So I kind of look at it and I kind of go, yep, I know, I seen that last year. But at least it gives me a good baseline that, okay, I'm on the right track of learning what is going to be evolving into the future, things like that. Case in point, I'm actually going to do a separate video topic of talking about top technologies and protocols that you should be considering now for 2019 and beyond. But that'll be a different episode. But one example of one of these hot trends that I read in November or December of 2018 was about Go programming or Golang. So I was like, interesting. What is that? And it basically is another programming language that was kind of developed by Google. And they're seeing good trends with that. Python is still very, very high. That's why all my experience and training is around Python. But Go programming is something that is growing very gradually. So it's like, I want to take more interest of learning Go programming. Okay. So there it is. I have learned one particular topic that I want to learn about. So then once you determine what is the hot trends and protocols and technologies, then you got to figure out, well, how do I configure them? Well, the challenging part is that it may be more of a business concept, not something like this is an actual solution that you can deploy for a customer, like the Internet of Things, right? IoT. That is so broad that I've never seen anyone really effectively say, hey, we're going to deploy an IoT solution today, because there's so many moving parts around that thing. So it's really more conversations of the practical application of how they can be used. Okay. So what I typically do is if someone talks about hot technologies, then I look at the major vendors. I say, who are the top companies? So let's forget about Go programming for a second. Let's say that I learned that the hot technology is VXLAN. Okay. Which is a very big thing in data center networks. So I go, okay, great. Who are the leaders and have products for doing VXLAN implementation? So Cisco will be on that list. So I said, great. What products support that? So like the Cisco 9000 series. Okay, good. Let me learn more about those products. And is there any configuration examples for VXLANs? Oh, there is. Perfect. So now let me go ahead and mock that up into a virtual lab environment like GNS3, for example. And go ahead and use that sample, configure things, change things around, change things to the point of how can I use this in a practical deployment. And then great, everything works. I use show commands, I get comfortable with it, I break things, I just learn dirtily, if that's even a word, about VXLANs. Okay, that's an example. And then, of course, in the process, I'm determining, hey, what are some best practices for doing a VXLAN implementation, or how to design it for a data center, things like that. And that has been a big part of what I included probably like a year or 2 years ago into my network design cookbook, the second edition, because I started to do more VXLAN deployments and I learned about best practices and how to design it. So I included those pods in my book. And because of that experience, that when I work on customer projects and they talk about certain things by having tenants and having things more isolated, having a co-location for their cloud computing environment, hey, I have a recommendation for how we can do that. We can do a VXLAN implementation. You're the right size to have this kind of hardware, the Cisco 9000 series switches. We can get quotes for that. We'll get things configured, and here's how everything would work. I can do that now because I have the hard knowledge of knowing that that is a hot trend technology for a data center environment. I know how to configure it, and I know how to design it and to provide best practices towards it. And we're done with this episode. So if you have any questions about being a network engineer or anything in the networking field, post those questions below in the comments, and your question may appear in another episode for Ask the Network Engineer. So thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and support us at routhub.net or on my Patreon page. And until next time, as always, keep networking.